gonna hit record.
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Welcome to Life's Not Linear, everybody. Today we are interviewing the awesome Trish Bonica, and I'm so excited to get to know them. I'm gonna hand it off to Trish, and they will introduce themselves.
Oh, wow. Well, this is fantastic, Tara, and I'm so just really thrilled to join you and just to be of any kind of support or sounding board to anyone in their 20s, maybe early 30s that are experiencing life's transitions. I'm just grateful for the chance to talk, to share some things about myself. Hopefully they're relevant. If they're not, certainly feel free to kind of dismiss them, but I'm just here as someone to kind of represent my life's journey.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. And, you know, before I talk about me, I just want to acknowledge who I think I'm speaking with, who I'd like to speak with based on what I know from based on what Tara shared with me and based on what Humera Fasidin has shared with me. And essentially, you know, as we are working to inform ourselves on a daily basis, like whether it's a podcast, a news feed, network channel, the phrase that I hear over and over again is this myriad reference to unprecedented times. And it's true. So as recent graduates, as folks in your mid, early 20s, wherever you are, you're navigating unprecedented simultaneous crises, such as obviously the COVID public health crisis. Maybe there's grief and fear that you're experiencing due to the illness of a beloved. You're navigating an environment marked by racist violence, racially motivated murders. You're witness to the deployment of, you know, federal law enforcement resources to our cities. You might be experiencing, or your families might be experiencing, economic stability in the form of lost jobs, lost job prospects. If you're working, maybe you're experiencing reductions in work, wages, benefits. Your families are experiencing perhaps other uncertainties, and our communities are experiencing other stressors. So all of these things combined are really a remarkable set of challenges. And because of these challenges, I really think it's important for us to just define on our own terms what success looks like. What does it mean to be successful? And in my view, looking back, looking at what I imagine different people that I care about are experiencing, is that like survival is an accomplishment right now. And maintaining our health is a victory. Staying in connection with others is really a gift. And then anyone who has any kind of options in front of them that feel viable, substantial, affirming, that is a major privilege. So I want to start.
I completely agree.
Oh,
so
good.
Well said.
Well, thank you. Well, again, I've been thinking about this because this has really been a transformative experience for me to think about speaking with you guys, or at least sort of trying to be in conversation digitally for the past 2 weeks. And I want to share something that happened to me when I was 22, because it is something that has absolutely impacted my life in so many ways since that experience. And here's what happened. So I had just graduated school. I was in school in Massachusetts at Smith College. That's where I met Humera Fasidin. And she's obviously a dear friend. And what happened was, I'm the oldest daughter of a formerly abused woman, a formerly abused mom. And so the background that I came to school with was one of chaos and violence. And so when I was leaving what was like a very idyllic in many ways experience at Smith, you know, I was dreading being cast back out into this world where I really didn't know what my place was, how to create meaning, if I was even capable or competent to kind of move forward in a way that satisfied myself. So I didn't feel very attached to living. And I'm not trying to say I was trying to harm myself. I'm trying to say I had no idea how to proceed. And I was actually really, hurt, and lots of things were going on. So at that time, I am in Washington, D.C., in Union Station. It's the early 90s. So if anyone remembers the early 90s, or, you know, had any experience with them, you know, like, En Vogue was there. You know, the Boyz II Men Motown Philly was happening. You know that the Red Hot Chili Peppers went mainstream. Lots of things were funny about the early 90s. But so I'm in the Union Station, and I'm literally in a crowd, a throng of, what had to be at least thousands of people. It was sort of like a day or two before Thanksgiving. So we're in Union Station, the giant train station there, trying to get a train back to New Jersey, New York area. So what happened was I'm in this row of people, just long, long line. And all of a sudden there was like some little brush or like little gentle push behind me. And I turned around and I noticed that there was a petite, older, maybe, 60, 65-year-old Black woman walking by. And okay, so then I just turned back into the row and I just remained there. So a few minutes later, the announcer says the train's ready to board. So all of us are moving towards various entrances of this train. And I happen to just go to one. Again, I'm surrounded by all of these people. I walk onto the train car, and all of a sudden I see the woman that kind of brushed by me in the line, and I felt this unusual compulsion to sit in the empty seat next to her, even though there were, plenty of empty seats because everyone was boarding. And I just sat down. She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything other than maybe like a, half smile kind of situation. And about, 20 minutes into our train ride, she turns to me and just starts speaking. And what she's sharing are the recent experiences in her life working sort of like, I think it was maybe like an accountant for a white family in Texas. And she's telling me about her experiences, and she's telling me about the family's composition and the dynamics within that family. And it is mirroring my home experiences, and particularly the father in this Texas scenario is mirroring the experiences that I had with my own. And I mean, it was immediately clear to me that there were parallels. And at first I thought, oh, well, that's just, such a coincidence. But everything she said had some kind of direct implication for my life. And she told me that her life's hardest or most challenging thing to overcome was her own anger. And she said to me, I see that you have the same challenge. She didn't know me. Yeah, she said to me, you have the same challenge and you have to work on that. And sort of like, at this point, I'm now riveted. I don't even know what's going through my head. I'm like staring at her in total like absorption of what she's saying. And I'm trying to think like, what's happening here? Because I didn't really know. And so our conversation continues, there's more, but essentially my stop is before hers. And so as I turn to her and I say, this is my stop, she takes my hand and puts it in between her two hands, like sort of pressing down on it lightly. And she says, my name is Muriel. This is verbatim. My name is Muriel. We probably won't meet again, so pass it on. And that was our encounter. Yeah, that was our encounter. So I've been thinking for, almost 20 years, what does it mean to pass it on? What did she mean by that? What does she want me to do, right? What am I expected to do? What's my responsibility in this moment based on that gift of, insight, connection. So I'm here because I've thought about that for 20 years. And, I think it means that we have to decide for ourselves to remove the thing that impedes our progress, that impedes our growth, that impedes our connection with others. We have to identify it. We have to name it. We know I know it's a scary thing to do, but I had to do it in order to have a life that made sense to me. So that's what I wanted to share.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you decided to sit next to her and that she decided to open up to you, and just like, a good, I don't want to say like a coincidence, but I think the universe was like, these two people are meant to have a conversation.
Yes, definitely.
So now that you've been thinking about how did that affect you kind of like right after she told you that? I know you've been thinking about it for 20 years, but how was that progressed?
Well, I mean, I literally was stunned by this story, and I hadn't thought critically, honestly, even though, I had plenty of opportunities. I hadn't thought critically about, you know, who I was and what I was supposed to be doing in my life, or not supposed to be doing, excuse me, that's what I'm trying to counter. What I wanted to be doing as a reflection of my values and the things that were important to me and the people that were important to me, and the kind of impact that I'd hoped to have. I hadn't thought critically about those things because I had been sort of, you know, denying sort of the things that were in me that were really scary. And this stranger named it for me. And I don't think if she hadn't named it, I wouldn't have come to an understanding of what she said in the time frame that I did. It would have taken me far longer. So the question is always, what is the work to pass it on? And how do I live that in my life? And I can, you know, we can take it from there, but I can talk about that through work choices or just, you know, what I think is my particular frame. So.
That'd be great. I was going to ask kind of like what you studied in school, but then also what you did after graduation. And then now tying this in, kind of like how your perspective shifted and what you want to do in life based off of that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is true really, but I've always thought, like, so at my age 50, graduating in 1992 from undergraduate, what I thought was that I might be among the last of sort of that generation where, I don't know if that's true, but it felt like, even though I went to a good school, even though there were, you know, empowered, privileged people around me, even though I certainly had lots of privilege in my life, there wasn't really an active conversation about what are your choices from a professional standpoint, from a work standpoint. How do you integrate professional life and personal life? How do you do work that, you know, makes sense on any number of dimensions? Those weren't conversations that I was having. I don't think I was, and if there were those conversations happening, I wasn't aware of them. And I'd like to think, because I'm a step parent to 2 young adults, that is now changed, that people are engaged with folks your age, hopefully actively, around the art of becoming. So because I didn't really think I had that, you know, it was kind of like, well, what I really wanted to do was leave my family home in New Jersey. And so I went to DC. So this was DC in the early to mid, you know, 90s. And I just started off in things that made sense given my background at college, which was like English lit, secondary education kind of stuff. And so I went into nonprofit sort of education in DC, like working for an association of higher ed. And that took me, you know, on things that seemed related. I did some work for a nonprofit environmental organization. I then decided to get my master's in social work. That brought me back to DC, where I was doing some contract work at the federal level with the Department of Labor. I then, what did I do? I then got involved in some other higher education, then moved my entire life to Iowa City, Iowa for personal reasons, relationship reasons, became a step parent, that kind of thing. And then it became a different set of considerations around how do I have work that can sustain a family. So I had different economic circumstances, which led me to different choices. So I started some for-profit education management type work, did that for some time, and then came back to the community that I thought I always wanted to be in, which was Western Mass. So even when I was in school here, I had this idea that I would return. So I'm now in Springfield, Mass, and I work in human resources. So I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for a nonprofit human services called the YWCA of Western Mass. So lots of jobs. Yeah, lots of jobs, lots of titles, you know, at different points in my life. I thought, you know, I took different meaning from different titles and professional accomplishments. And, you know, I look back and I think, I probably now would define it differently, because what's important for me now is really, and I hope that there were threads of this throughout, but what's important is really like purpose. What is my purpose? What is my life's purpose? And to what extent am I making choices that mirror or that reinforce that purpose?
Have you always had this type of reflective mindset, or like from your collegiate years, or how did you develop this, I'd say? Because I feel like I'm lucky enough I feel like I'm on that similar mindset path, but a lot of my peers, I mean, we're just kind of like thrown into college if we're lucky enough to go,
right?
But then it's like, you know, figure it out or don't. And that looks different for everybody. So I'm curious to hear about how you've reached this point.
Well, you know, I don't know that I've reached, you know, reflection, because I think that's a really high bar, but I know that I've had really amazing people with me throughout my entire life, both in professional and personal contexts, and Humira is one of them. So like, I think about, how do you go about defining things on your own terms that make sense based on your own multiple identities or your own belief, values, framework? And it's like, you know, it's just, there's so many popular concepts about success and about what a life should contain. And there's implications for how we invest our energy, our efforts, our resources, our, you know, time. And on some level, there's an expectation that we, as humans, as successful people, that means that we're achieving specific milestones, and we're doing it within socially acceptable time frames. And, you know, I think reflection is about questioning if those things make sense, right? Because those are, on at least on some level, kind of a mythical, formulaic version of what success is. So then it's like, okay, so then let's use our reflective powers. I will use my reflective powers to say, well, then what's my alternative narrative? What's my version? How do I control my own or influence my own terms? And it's about, okay, well, attainment and success is fantastic if it's our own choosing, right? And if it's not at the expense of the relationships that are so dear to us. And if the methods used for that attainment reflect our values, and then if the ultimate result of our attainment or success is our expansion of people to make positive change. That's what I'm taking for myself over these years that I've come to, is like, that's my criteria for success. And I would hope that you know, that we're all, that young folks like yourself, Tara, are empowered, and we're, as communities, we're empowering younger folks to define it for themselves and to reject the things that have been defined for them if it doesn't fit.
I'm really glad you said that, because I've definitely, you know, been asked the question like, oh, was it successful? Are you successful? And my rebuttal is always like, well, it depends on how you define success.
Totally.
You know, it looks different for everybody. So I think,
yes.
I mean, success to a lot of people, at least in my, like, I would go to an engineering school and I graduated with primarily engineers, and always I feel like a lot of theirs is like, oh, well, what's your starting salary? That's like how you measure your success. They're like, oh, did you graduate in 4 years? Is that how you measure success? You know, it's not.
Of course it
not
is.
to me.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And you made the point beautifully. Like, success from a dominant lens is something that reflects, right, white, capitalist, hetero, patriarchal norms. So get the money, get the
ridiculous.
And those things are fine. I mean, those things are what people will choose if that's your frame. But if it's not, then we just need to support each other in creating alternatives.
Yeah. I would like to go back. Earlier you were saying, I guess I would like to know, like, what you have defined your purpose as. Like, what do you enjoy doing in life, and what is your purpose? And
Yeah.
maybe like, how do you define, or I guess you just said how you define success for yourself.
Yeah. So, well, I think I've had lots of things that I've enjoyed professionally through the years. So I'm fortunate in that way. I've had things that I haven't enjoyed through the years, and that's been painful at many times. But I think the thing that ultimately gives me the greatest sense of fulfillment is the work in connection with others, and is finding a purpose that's not just, or is not centered solely on meeting my own individual needs or the needs of, my immediate family. Like, there has to be for me, some social benefit. And that doesn't, if you disagree, it doesn't mean I'm better than you or you're, whatever. It's not that. It's just that for me has become what purpose is. And that's to participate in some ways that contribute to the quality of life for others. So my agency right now, the organization is an anti-violence organization for survivors of sexual assault, intimate partner violence, human trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I find fulfilling.
What is the name of your organization again?
Oh, sure. It's called the YWCA of Western Mass. There's about 300 YWs nationally, and so we're one of them in Western Mass. We're about an organization of about 150 people with, let's say at any given time, maybe somewhere between 75 and 100 folks living with us in our residential programs.
Wow. And how did you end up there? Like, how did you pursue this position in this nonprofit?
Well, I mean, you alluded to earlier, Tara, that like our family of origin stories are so impactful. So, I think I'm on some level engaged in anti-violence work to reconcile some of my early experiences. I also think it's just where my importance is, and where I think I'm my best professional self, I think, is doing the work that I'm doing now and human resources in this particular agency. Like, things make sense. When you have a position that you're really struggling with either learning or figuring out how to work across teams or whatever it is that's really presenting a struggle, it could mean something as simple as, oh, well, there's just a lot of learning that needs to take place here. And that's certainly true. But it could just mean that something about it is not working and may not work. And I had to come to realize that, some of the things I've chosen to do just didn't work. And I didn't, I wasn't my best self in those roles.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, of course.
I feel like you have so much like experiences and wisdom to share, just from briefly like knowing high level of like what you've done. And I guess, so you said you had that pivotal moment with that woman on the train. Has there been any other like pivotal moments since then that you've like maybe realized something?
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully we have lives that every day present something, right? Or at least pretty frequently something pivotal. I'm trying to think about it from the perspective of being a step parent. So it's like, I think pivotal is the experience of affirmation. So when we are in relationships with people, whether in our families or whatever kinds of relationships we structure, it's like, providing affirmation and receiving affirmation for the major things. I'm not talking about, little decisions that we make routinely. I'm talking about the major stuff, the major things that require support, whether we give it or receive it or both. Those are pivotal moments, because those major points in our life carry all kinds of impacts. And of course, they're going to carry unintended consequences that we didn't foresee. And hopefully those consequences won't be negative for ourselves or others, but those are the pivotal moments.
That makes sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Okay. I'm trying to think. I have like so many questions. I'm trying to pick the right direction.
Yeah.
So do you mind if I ask, how has your experience been as a parent when coming from a family where you didn't maybe have like the best, most compassionate parents?
Sure. Wow. That is quite a question. You know, I don't know that, honestly, I don't know that anyone's ever asked me that question before. So I appreciate that question. You know, honestly, I did not know what I was doing. I had no idea. And I have an amazing partner, wife, Amy, and, you know, so it's a huge credit to her. But I remember a dear friend of mine, Jamie, who, when I was telling her about, you know, having this life, moving in together, becoming this family in Iowa City, Iowa, what she said was, don't make any decisions in sort of like a parental role for at least 6 months. Don't take any actions, just follow, you know, Amy's lead, figure out the family dynamic. Do not do anything. And at the time I was sort of like, well, that's weird advice. Like, what does that mean? How can you not do anything? But I quickly realized what she meant, because I wasn't positioned to do anything well, right? Because I really hadn't learned how to, you know, parent and be in a family in the way that I'd hoped. Yeah. So
do you think you've been able to find some like healing or solace, and now you're in the position to be a parent?
Wait, say that. You cut out a little bit, Tara.
Oh, I was saying, do you think that now that you're in the position of being a parent, you've been able to find maybe some healing or some solace in that?
Oh, sure. Yes, definitely. You know, I've done my best. And again, I had, you know, their biological parent is an amazing parent. So as a step parent, they're young adults. They're closing in on 25, 30 in some ways. So, you know, my parenting actively on a day-to-day is now behind me, you know. But definitely, I mean, like every skill, you practice it, you receive feedback, you absorb it, you learn from others that do it much better than you, and you gain proficiency. And I found that, I'm not going to say I was a proficient parent, but I'm going to say that I certainly progressed in my learning about parenting and about being in a family.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, of course.
So I have one last question that I would like to ask today, and maybe we can do another interview. But I was wondering, what is one piece of advice that you would want to give to, you know, the younger maybe students that you work with on a day-to-day? Like, what is a piece of advice that you would give them?
Well, I would say that your life is just too big, and your potential is too important to be contained. And so my wish for anyone who's younger would be that you're not unduly constrained by forces that constrict us, that wish to limit us, that wish to, you know, only recognize us if we conform to certain standards. My wish for you is that is not an incredibly impactful thing in your life, that you get to create alternatives, that you have supporting people around you, that you can draw from your networks and your communities and really become what you intend to become. That is my wish, and that is the thing that I hope for you.
Thank you so much, Trish, for being authentic and transparent with us and sharing everything that you've learned, and for giving me like your time and energy today to have this interview. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate your time so much, and I can't wait to learn more about your project, and I'm so thankful to be a small part of it.